All right, for the next section, we have segment addition and midpoints. So this is basically the midpoint is going to be halfway in between. We know that M is the midpoint because this dash right here tells me that PM is equal to MQ because they both have that little dash through them. A segment bisector is going to be a line or a ray that cuts directly through the midpoint. So when you see the word segment bisector, it means that whatever that line is in the middle is literally cutting the segment in half. Here's the midpoint formula. If you are struggling with memorizing all of these formulas, because this is actually a really popular formula, just think of it as the average of your x's and the average of your y's. All right, let's go ahead and do an example. I know that sometimes whenever they give you fill in the blanks, they're a little bit more complicated than just doing the problem. So try not to let it confuse you. So here we go. Let's say this is my x1 and my y1. This is my x2 and my y2. And we're going to go ahead and find the midpoint of these two. So let me write down the equation. It is x1 plus x2, just so you have it for your reference. And then y1, y2 divided by 2. So you'll notice I have 3 plus, this should be negative 3, and then 5 plus negative 1. And this is why I don't really like to fill in the blanks, because some people need more steps than others. And I want to make sure I'm showing you all the steps, even though some of you don't need them. But I'm just going to combine 3 plus negative 3 is going to be 0. And 5 plus negative 1 is going to be 4. So when I reduce that, 0 divided by 2 is 0, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So my midpoint is 0, 2. You'll notice that there's also this additional line or piece of information that says RS lies on the y-axis. So let's refresh a little bit with that definition. So we need to see what are the similarities of a point that lies on the y-axis. Let's say this is 1 and 2 and negative 1, okay? If I was to actually label each of these points, I would label this point as 0, negative 1, right? And this one would be 0, 1. And the next one would be 0, 2. And I could keep on going, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5. And if I look at all of these points and I look at the values that make up that point, what do you notice that they have in common? All of these points have their x value as 0. So when you have something that falls on the y-axis, then your x is going to be equal to 0. Okay? So I'm just going to wrap this up in a sentence. So the midpoint of RS is 0, 2, which lies on the y-axis. Okay? Next question. If AB has the endpoints as follows, then the midpoint AB is the origin. I kind of feel like they're just putting that extra sentence in there to give you a hint, but I do like that I get the chance to review this old vocabulary with you, because we're not going to be creating a new vocab list to go over origin and y-axis. Those are vocabulary words that you should know already from Algebra 1. But again, I don't want to assume. So if you don't know what the origin is, it's right here. And the point of the origin is always 0, 0. So basically, this question is telling me that when I find the midpoint of this line segment, that my answer should be 0, 0. So let me write down the midpoint formula again, just in case you feel like you still need it to reference. Average of the x's and average of the y's. I'm going to say this is my point 1, so x1, y1, x2, y2. And I'm going to go ahead and start filling in. So here's my x's, 6 plus negative 6. Just be careful with your signs. Honestly, in an Algebra 2 honors class, that's usually the only mistake that we see is little algebra mistakes. Students tend to understand the new material, but they mess up on little stuff like signs and things like that. All right. So then 6 plus a negative 6 is 0, right? and negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And sure enough, that does give me the 0.00. So I kind of know that I have it correct because of how they worded the question. So let me just finalize this in sentence form. So AB has midpoints of 0, 0, which is the origin. Okay. All right, next question. Okay, I'm not going to rewrite the formula this time. Hopefully you know, add the x together, divide them by 2, add the y's together, divide it by 2, right? So let's go with this one. We got 7 plus negative 5. Those are my x's. My y's are 0 and negative 4, so we're adding them together. 7 plus negative 5 is the same as 7 minus 5. That's 2. 0 plus negative 4 is the same as 0 minus 4, so that's negative 4. And then 2 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Now, let's review some old vocabulary again. What does it mean for something to be in quadrant 4? So, if you don't remember what your quadrants are, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if our midpoint falls in quadrant 4, that means we should have a point in this area. And sure enough, if I plot the points 1, 2, it does fall in quadrant 4. So let's sum this up with a question. Line segment JK has a midpoint of 1, negative 2, which lies in quadrant 4. All right, and that is it for your midpoint formula. That's really all that you need to know for finding the midpoint. So just remember for your next set of assignments, I don't really want you guys sitting and doing all of your assignments at once or all of these videos at once. I would prefer for you right now to stop for a little bit and work for at least 10 to 15 minutes on beginning your homework, okay? So your homework is going to be 1.1, numbers 5 through 22. I don't think you'll have access to my HRW yet. So I've included everything on my HRW in the hyperlink here. So make sure that you click on that. It should show up on the next slide. It also includes additional notes if you needed some more examples.